At any point, if you hear me say something that you just absolutely don't agree with, or you have a question or a comment, just pipe right up, and we'll talk about it. First things first. It's very difficult for a political reporter or for the politicians themselves to interpret the results of an election where you had just slightly under 29% of the city of Cincinnati's voters show up. You have in this city 202,900 voters registered on the rolls. Slightly over 58,000 of them bothered to show up. That is astounding to me, and it's the lowest in my memory, and I think it is probably the lowest turnout for a city election in the history of charter government. Because we've had participation before. Somebody over the Board of Elections has given me some numbers on turnout in previous elections in the city of Cincinnati, okay? I'm talking about the city of Cincinnati only, in council election years. And if you went back to 1975, which, was not that long ago, I can remember 1975. I'm sure all of you can. That was the year that actually David Mann was first elected to city council, and now he's been elected again. What do you think the turnout was in 1975 in the city of Cincinnati? Any guesses?
48%.
I'm sorry?
65%.
That's pretty darn close. It was 64.47%. You win the door prize. The next year, 1977, this is a city council election. Okay, I'm not talking about a presidential election. This is a city council election in an odd-numbered year. 1977, 69.66% of the voters in the city of Cincinnati went out to vote. 1977. Now, we get like 72% show up in a presidential election year, and we think that's really good. Well, it's not that. But in effect, what you had with this election, with 28.84% of the voters of the city of Cincinnati taking the time to either vote early or to go to their polling places on election day. You had, in effect, John Cranley was elected mayor by 16% of the registered voters in Cincinnati. Okay? Think about that. Roxanne Qualls had the votes of 12% of the registered voters in the city of Cincinnati. Now, why are these people not showing up? Are they just absolutely disillusioned with the process? Yeah.
Well, I think the American people don't understand their system.
Yeah.
Well, for instance, in a secure red or blue state, it's the primary election that counts. People don't understand that.
Yeah.
And most of the decisions of society are made by a small number of people in the best of years.
Yes, that is true. But there's got to be a reason why those 7 out of 10 don't participate. And yes, sir.
Would you repeat what he said, please?
Well, you're basically saying that the people, they're red and blue states, and the primary elections are the ones in which, candidates are chosen. Now, excuse me, in the city of Cincinnati, we have this primary system for mayor. We have since 2001. If more than 2 candidates file, which they did this year, you have to have a primary election in September. And we had it on September 10th. Now, you had John Cranley, you had Roxanne Claus, you had Jim Burns, the Libertarian fellow, and you had someone named Queen Noble, who has run for offices many times before and never gotten any votes. Now, in that primary election, only 6.8% of the voters showed up. Now, you can almost understand that intellectually because you looked at the field of 4 candidates, and there were 2 of them who were very well known to Cincinnatians, Roxanne Claus and John Cranley. They've been on the ballot many times. They are able to raise a great deal of money. They have a lot of name recognition. Both of them had run against Steve Shabbat for Congress. So they were going to win. There was no question about it. You know, Jim Burns wasn't going to win. Queen Noble wasn't going to finish in the top 2. So people stayed home. They didn't participate in it. But then you had a highly competitive race with 2 very well-known candidates, both Democrats, between Cranley and Claus. And still, only 3 out of 10 showed up. And I have to think that there is, you know, a certain amount of cynicism about the process now, that people just don't think it matters. They don't think it affects them. They don't, you know, they look at not only what happens at Cincinnati City Hall, but they look at their state government, they look at the federal government, they look at the White House, and they just throw up their hands and say it doesn't matter to me. Yes, sir.
Did you see the article by the young man in the newspaper who
Yes.
had about 2 columns on why he didn't bother to vote?
Yes. He's mentioning a column that was written in the Enquirer by a fellow who was talking about why he didn't vote in the election. And basically said he didn't care. He had better things to do. It didn't matter.
Golf and hanging out with his friends.
Right, golf and hanging out with his friends. Okay, now that's the attitude that you got to deal with. And you know, it's astounding to me, having grown up with politics and been involved with it for so many years and covering it for this is my 40th year of covering politics, believe it or not. And that kind of attitude is astounding, but it is out there. Yes, sir.
Howard, have you looked at the numbers? What about early voting and absentee ballots? Because there was a big change in the absentee ballot distribution this time.
Right. Well, I mean, number one, the applications for absentee ballots were way down from 2011 and 2009. Now, part of that can be explained by the fact that unlike 2009 and 2011, you had major, very hotly contested, very expensive ballot issues, statewide ballot issues on the ballot. 2011, you had the repeal of Senate Bill 5. That drove a lot of people out. That drove a lot of people to vote absentee or to vote early because the unions were organizing a lot of that. 2009, if you recall, we had the casino issue on the ballot. And millions of dollars were spent to sell that idea to Ohio voters. And there was a very concentrated effort, a lot of money spent by the casino owners, obviously, to get people out early to the polls. Well, there wasn't anything like that this year. There wasn't a statewide ballot issue to help drive up the turnout.
Wasn't there a change this year? This year you had to request an absentee ballot, whereas before
Well,
you get a
yeah.
mailing from the Republicans or the Democrats or somebody saying,
Well, you can get, what it was the Secretary of State, John Houston, had told all 88 county boards of elections that they could not mail absentee ballot applications to all of the voters in their county this year.
so is that a voter suppression tactic? Or?
Well, yeah, you can make that argument. Now, his argument is that in the past, and Hamilton County